What is the most Karen thing a Karen has ever done to you personally? When I worked at the Home Depot, a Karen told me that she didn't want any black men to install her flooring. I was in charge of arranging her order and told her that we don't select which individuals exactly will install her floor and that she'll get who she gets. She proceeds to have a fit about it, demands white installers, asks to speak to my manager. I'm so glad she did, because my manager's name was Dwayne and he was a real big black dude. Turns out she didn't want to speak to the manager. Left her card in the EFT POS machine at the McDonald's I was managing as a teenager. Rang me to say I needed to drive it out to her, that I ruined her night, ruined her family's night. Owed her free food, and that she'll be laying a formal complaint when I refused all of the above. She showed up 3/4 of an hour later with steam blowing out of her ears asking for her card back. Last we heard from her. That I needed to leave the gym because I made her son feel like only fat people go to the gym. Blew up at me for ignoring her son who was trying to hit on me by saying konnichiwa and calling me kawaii. I had never met him before and I am not Japanese. She called me a stuck-up racist and insinuated that I should be glad he was worldly enough to speak Asian to me. I just responded, sorry, no English. They had previously heard me speaking English with my friend, I'm pretty sure, and walked away. When I worked at a bakery, Karen bought a chocolate cupcake and ate half of it. Karen then asked if she could return her half-eaten cupcake, not because she didn't like it, but because she wanted to exchange it for half of a vanilla cupcake, something less decadent. Like most bakeries, we did not sell cupcakes by the half. She became offended when I asked if she wanted to purchase a vanilla cupcake. Doctor here. I used to work in a public night shift service, kind of like an emergency room but for non-emergencies to keep the hospitals clear of white coats. So anything from a fever to a sore throat to prescriptions for urgent treatments. And a Karen walks in at 3 a.m. asking for a prescription for hypertension drugs, which isn't unusual as people, old people more often than not, but she looked 55, sometimes don't notice they're running low. Anyway, the law, not a rule, not my decision, the law states that this service can only write prescriptions for potentially life-threatening conditions drugs for a maximum of 72 hours coverage. So if you take 1 pill a day, I can only prescribe you a single blister. Here we don't have bottles, but blisters. And while I'm writing the prescription, Karen casually mentions that she was an insomniac, and while cleaning the medicine cabinet, she realized she was down to her last full blister. My pen stops. I ask her to repeat, full blister? Yeah. So I take the prescription, tear it in half, then again, and throw it in the bin, explaining her the law. She gets mad, starts yelling, and threatens to call the cops. Go ahead. Cops came, and she triumphantly announced that I'm refusing to treat her. I explain the situation, and they ask her if it's true that she has a full blister, and she, of course, being a Karen who is always right no matter what, confirms it. The cops look at her, still with a look of triumph, waiting for them to arrest me, then at me, then ask her politely to leave, as I'm in the right. She's livid. The day after, my boss called me and cracked up because she went there during the day to talk to the manager, and she, my boss, told her the exact same thing. Never saw her again in there, weirdly enough. I deliver appliances for Best Buy. We had a woman call and complain that her fridge was not pre-cooled before it was delivered and that she had to wait for it to come down to temp. No one in the office was prepared for that one. Worked at a grocery store and a coworker put a 99-cent sticker on my shirt. We were 2 of maybe 5 employees, so we were all good friends and everything is funny when you gotta pass time on a shift, so I just left it there. Some woman came through my line and asked me why I had a sticker on my shirt and I just kinda laughed it off. She asked if I thought it was funny, and I was like, not really, but sorta. She asked if my coworker put it there, to which I responded, yes. She told me she was going to speak to the store owner because it was disrespectful to behave that way at work. She told me to call my manager, and I did, but he was a super cool guy and knew this lady was a frickin' idiot. She talked to the store owner and my manager about firing me to no avail. She accomplished nothing and was a C, the end. When I was working retail, this one woman had a big bag of coupons. Most of them were unusable because either they were expired or they were duplicates. She berated me because the system was rejecting most of the coupons. She called me stupid, amongst other names, telling me I just wasn't doing it right. Then, as a typical Karen would, she asked to speak with my manager. My manager came and asked what the problem was. The woman ranted about how incompetent I was because I didn't know how to scan a coupon. My manager looked at the coupons, and the coupons were the problem, not me. My manager beat about the customer for being disrespectful to me and told the customer to leave the store. I hated working there, but I'm so grateful that I had managers that totally didn't go by the customer is always right rule and weren't afraid to stand up for their employees. That was just one of many incidents. Was at the park with my daughter. She was 3 at the time. Her and a couple of other kids started to play together. Then she attempted to use the monkey bars. She was a very adventurous child. About midway through, she fell. I didn't do anything because she'd fallen before, and I want her to learn to get back up on her own and not be scared to try anything. Anyway, one of the boys was about to get on the monkey bars too until I heard a woman run toward him screaming to stop. She picked him up and looked at my daughter, told her it wasn't smart of her to go on the monkey bars if she wasn't fully ready, because then others might get that same idea. That's when I got up and went to my daughter's defense, sternly told the woman not to speak to her that way, and it's no fault of hers that she wasn't scared to try something new. She took her kid and left. Came up to my register and asked for the price of a protein bar. Every item in the store had a physical price tag because we didn't have scanners at the register. I took it from her, flipped it over, and let her know it was $2.49 before tax. She asked me how much the case would be. Normally, we did discount for cases, but they had to be ordered ahead of time. So I started explaining we couldn't do a discount unless she cut me off aggressively and hissed, "I didn't ask for a discount." So I typed in $2.49 times 12, added tax, and told her the final price. She stared me down for a few minutes before asking to get my manager. Once my manager arrived, she spent literally 10 minutes tearing into me, describing me as the least helpful person ever, talking about my bad attitude, complaining about how awful and rude I was, etc., etc., etc. I was working nearly full-time, 35.5 hours per week, and commuting to a school over an hour away 4 days a week. This lady took the time out of her day to break me down to the point I started crying. Thanks, Karen. I still remember you. Hope you enjoy your frickin' protein bar. I used to work at a fast food and a theme park when I was 18. Karen held up the line because she was demanding us to assemble a food for her daughter, which we weren't allowed to do because we go by a menu. My daughter can't have that. Well, what can you do for me? Do you want her to starve? Are some of the most irritating lines I ever encountered. Asked for my manager's personal cell phone number to complain that I, 7 months pregnant at the time, would not carry a refrigerator that she had not paid for in the cost of her room up to her second-story room. We did not have an elevator. Rather than just accept an upgrade for free because she didn't want to unpack her stuff. She refused to believe we had rooms without fridges and I was just being fat and lazy. When I refused to give her the cell phone number, she asked for corporate's number. I wrote it down on a sticky note with a smiley face. She came down later and asked to move rooms. I made her pay the difference. I used to work retail, so I've come across my fair share of Karens. They were a huge reason why I went back to school and no longer work as a cashier. Anyways, one day while I was manning the registers with a few other coworkers of mine, I had a massive nosebleed right as I was finishing a transaction. I grabbed a tissue and quickly excused myself to run to the restroom so I could try to get it to stop bleeding. This meant that I couldn't say goodbye to Karen and give the little spiel about how I was oh so grateful for her shopping with us. Anyway, after about 10 minutes, I was finally able to get my nosebleed under control and headed back to the registers. I saw her waiting to the side with a scowl on her face, arms crossed over her chest, the whole 9 yards. She proceeds to scold me about how rude I was for not saying goodbye. After I apologized and explained that I had an unexpected nosebleed, she told me I should have tried holding it and that the customer comes first. My brain was literally, after that. My sister-in-law is the biggest Karen I've ever met, complains in almost every restaurant we have gone to, but this one time they were moving house and my bro asked me to help. I was staying at their place for a delivery truck that was to arrive early in the morning. We were having drinks and my bed/mattress was on the living room floor. At around 1:15, I said, I think I'm going to bed. She replied, are you kicking me out of my own living room? Not realizing she is crazy, I joked, I guess I am. She said, no one does that, and even though she had finished her last drink, made herself 2 cups of tea. She didn't go to bed till after 2:30. She told me the next morning she stayed up to show no one tells her what to do. I was a supervisor at Cost Plus World Market. A Karen comes in one night pushing a cart full of obviously used throw pillows and asks to return them. Of course, she has no receipt and instead wants us to just look her up in the system, except she refuses to provide her information for us to try to look her up. She starts yelling at my cashier, and that's when I stepped in to tell her very politely and calmly that she either needs a receipt or needs to provide us her name and phone number. She starts screeching and screaming about how we're buttholes and she'll get us fired and blah blah blah. Then she demands an apology from the president of the world. I'm certain she meant the president of World Market, but in her bleached hair fury she said the president of the world, and I barely held it together as I calmly offered her the corporate feedback number. She wouldn't take it and instead walked out of the store still yelling and without her cart of dirty pillows. She returned about 20 minutes later, quietly apologized, and took her pillows with her. We never heard from her again. Told me I couldn't work on my car in my own garage at noon because she didn't want my fast-looking car to influence her sons to be hooligans like you. Working retail one afternoon, and here comes Karen with a return. At first glance, it's no big deal, just coming in to return a shirt. She walks up to the register, hands me the receipt to start processing, and we exchange a pleasant greeting. I take the shirt out of the bag to examine it, and it is beyond disgusting. There were brown sweat stains all over it from the pits to the stomach to the shoulder. It looked like whoever wore it rolled in the mud or some nonsense. I proceed to tell Karen that I cannot return the product because it had clearly been used and that only unused and resellable items could be returned. Karen threw a fit, started screaming at me and accusing me of calling her a liar and whatnot. I hold up the shirt and point to the brown pit stains and say, "Karen, can't you see this stain?" Oh man, did that make it worse. She continues making a huge scene and demands to see the manager. Newsflash, Karen, I am the manager, and I'm not budging. After 20 or so minutes of complaining, she finally leaves, saying she'll be complaining to corporate and getting me fired and blah blah blah. Fast forward a few days, a guy walks into the store, finds the first store associate he can, and immediately asks for me by name. Uh-oh, here we go again. Anyway, my associate brings the guy over to where I'm standing and I politely greet him. The guy spends the next 10 minutes apologizing for his crazy wife Karen verbally abusing my staff and I a few days prior. Apparently, the guy went to the beach and did some type of CrossFit HIIT training class in the sand. Karen knows all of this. She was at the class with him. The guy ended up not liking the shirt for some reason and Karen thought she could pull a fast one on us by making a scene. Think again, Karen. Had a Karen threatened to report me to my manager for talking with other customers I was serving. I met plenty of Karens while working retail, but there's one who stands out. Karen was Indian and had the most entitled attitude of anyone I've ever met. She was also a regular customer, so we had to deal with her crap at least twice a week. Karen's favorite pastime would be to literally fill a trolley with clearance items. These are a nightmare as you have to reduce the price on the till manually. Management were worried about scanning fraud and so had disabled the multiplication button on the till. This meant that each item has to be scanned and discounted individually. Once all of her items had been scanned and discounted, Karen would always kick up a fuss over the price, accusing us of overcharging her and demanding to see a manager. Some managers would give in to Karen, which meant voiding the transaction and starting over. If they told Karen to get lost, she'd complain about never shopping here again and storm out, leaving a full trolley of goods to put back. Thanks, B. Either way, the entire crap show would take at least an hour. There was a nice moment of karma for Karen, however. One winter, we had an especially heavy snowstorm. Our policy in this case is to clear the car park access to the spaces closest to the door. We do this as very few people come out when it's snowing, and it lets people park as close as possible. Not Karen, though. Oh no! She pulls into the car park, drives into the uncleared section, and tries to drive through a snowdrift, hitting a covered billboard in the process. She then clomps into the store, demanding to see the manager, and proceeds to yell at him point blank. Apparently, she was going to sue us and get every employee fired for not clearing her usual parking space of snow. Our manager responded by banning her from our store for being abusive towards staff. In tech support, this Karen had started a PowerPoint presentation, saved it, gave it a name, worked on it for 8 hours, closed it, and when the program said, "Do you want to save changes?" said no. So the program did what it was told and dumped them, and surprisingly, when she reopened it, it was blank. I explained that she told it not to, interrupted. No, that is not acceptable. You will fix it. No, there is no. Interrupted. Go around this circle several times. I finally call on the call support for her company and explain what was going on. Have you ever had someone roll their eyes so hard you could hear them over a phone? Then conferenced Karen, who started right in before either of us could say anything with how incompetent I was, etc., etc. Let her burble for a minute, then cut her off. She started squawking and he cut her off again and again and again until she finally shut up out of sheer surprise, I think. Screeching like a harpy didn't work? What world is this? He explained to her the same thing that I had, and she started yowling again and he chopped her off. No, you've wasted my time on my day off working as a favor to people with actual problems, and you've wasted tech support's time. You were abusive to both of us, and I'm going to report you to HR in the morning. Goodbye. Click. He hangs up, and I'm laughing my butt off as she spits and sputters like an engine that just got a good solid swig of water. I was standing on a crowded train, and a pregnant Karen started screaming at me because she had nowhere to sit. Me, the person who was standing, because there were no seats. She started screaming like it was my fault that there were no seats. I was working at my job as a cashier at my local supermarket. We were swamped with people. I had at least 7 people waiting in my line. One of my good friends from high school was in my line, and I talked to him as I was ringing up his stuff. After he left, I welcomed the next lady in line and asked the usual stuff. Did you find everything okay? How are you doing? Etc. Before I could get a word out, she asked to speak to my manager. Apparently, I was rude to her for not including her in my conversation with my high school friend. She didn't chime in or anything, and I had never seen her in my life. Frickin' Karen, man. I worked at a home improvement store for a while in college. I was a cashier in the garden section. This woman pulls up on the curb in a no parking zone, grabs her fertilizer and soil. As I check her out, she goes frickin' ballistic that I didn't help load her car and she was going to report me to managers. Due to company policy, I wasn't allowed to. Other employees were, though. Her face mole was shaking and everything, over a bag of soil that weighed under 10 pounds and a handle of fertilizer. I was in line at her neighborhood grocery store. The woman ahead of me was purchasing a single birthday card. She stood there frowning after paying for it, and when the checker asked what was wrong, she said that she needed someone to carry the card to her car for her. A single card in an envelope. I work at a coffee shop where a woman came up to me to complain that her lattes weren't filled to the top. I had seen her husband sneak sips on the walk over, but I wasn't going to say that. So I gladly offered to remake both drinks, but she said, I don't want you to fix this. I just want you to know I'm disappointed in you. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.